those types of games. And what they wanted to do is a complete, like, global simulation of life. And what they ended up with was Spore. And it's a really interesting design experiment for how would you create an engaging world where people could follow the entire course of life. And in the process, as I mentioned before, it sort of recapitulates almost all of the mistakes that people make about when they think about evolution, and they're not biologists, right? There's a part in the game where when you reproduce in the game, I don't know if you saw it up there before, little hearts show up around the creatures that are interacting. When you reproduce them, the egg comes up into the screen, and you get to choose your features. Now, that might not be fictional in the very near future, right? I mean, there's already folks who are talking about that, but typically, from an evolutionary perspective, there's no feature choice at that level. There's accidents that happen, and that may or may not give you an evolutionary advantage. But it's interesting how when you create an interactive version of how life developed, you recapitulate the same mistake that every person who's a layperson makes about how life developed. So some people could ask, well, is Spore a good game to use in a learning environment? Of course it is, because it gives you a dynamic representation of how not to think about evolution. Right? Now, so you think about, like, how is evolution taught in K-12 in 9th and 10th grade? Well, A, typically it's not. But B, when it is, there's sort of like the little thing you read about Lamarckian evolution, and a little thing about Darwin, and a little thing about Russell, and then something about a finch. And then you move on. Right? But having an interactive model like this that you could actually see what happens when you choose different features and what kind of competitive advantage they give you, and then to disabuse people of the notion that's represented in the simulation, both surfaces people's misconceptions and then allows you to address them in a dynamic way. The other game I want to show you it's a little horrifying. It's a game that came out last year called BioShock. And BioShock is an example of a game that's really stretching what we mean by interactive media, or interactive narratives. And I want to show you, this might be a little disturbing for you, but you're all big people, so you can get this. So the story in BioShock is that you find this underwater, sort of underwater empire. And the empire is a city that was developed in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, but it's been abandoned. It was this sort of huge genetic experiment. It's been abandoned, but some of the creatures that were being developed in the underwater city still survive. Right? This is a pretty conventional formula in a lot of horror fiction and horror movies. The trick here is that you're the protagonist in the underwater world, and you have to try to figure out what's going on by interacting with these monsters. And the thing that makes BioShock such a compelling narrative is the look and feel of the game. You actually feel like you're a part of a story as it's moving on. BioShock is built on a first-person shooter basic idea, and many of you who've played first-person shooters, you know how it works, right? You get guns to shoot monsters, and when the monsters get bigger, you get bigger guns. End of story, right? But the sense of the narrative is sort of like a contrivance that's put on the end. But here, the narrative plays front and center. I'll just play you a little bit about BioShock. You're the character in the front here. You could see your hands and what kind of weapon you have. And then you could see how, when the monsters come, you get really scared. That's a bad guy.
What do they want from me? You stop!
could see if you like Stephen King or those kinds of narratives, you could put yourself into this kind of a narrative. Usually, typically, what I'll do is every holiday season around Christmas, I'll get whatever game it is that people are talking about. And last Christmas, I got this game and just scared the crap out of myself for 2 straight weeks watching this thing. And I would hear this, and I thought, what the hell is that? But it really sort of gets into you because it's so visceral, the feeling of interacting with this narrative. Now, typically what happens in game design, of course, is that the same thing happened with movie development, right? Is the content that's most attractive to people gets represented first. So it's porn and violence, which happens in all new media, right? They're the ones that sort of set the stage for the expansion of the range of possibilities of expression in that media. But we're starting to see with games like BioShock and with like Grand Theft Auto 3 and 4 how games are expanding the way that we can tell stories. People have gone to see The Godfather for years now as sort of a classic in modern movie making. Games like Grand Theft Auto and games like this one, NBA Live, or NBA The Life, I'm sorry, I got the name wrong, allow you to put yourself in the place of an unattainable person, somebody who you could never be, to see what that world would be like. And I'll show you a little clip from NBA The Life, and you could see how the game makers have represented that. Sorry these are so dark. Oh, what happened to my sound? Oh, here it is. Okay.
You hear that, son? That means they want more. I want more.
The D-League kid is putting on a heck of a show in his first game.
I'm gonna let this kid right here just turn it loose.
What are you doing out there? Move, move, move! Let's go! Get on D!
Move back!
That's right. Show me the love. I need your shot again, son. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3.
D!
Some guys have that it factor. This kid seems to have that and some.
It's time to answer the bell and win the ring.
That's a video game. It wasn't NBA highlights. These games like this allow you to put yourself in positions where you'd never be able to, which is exactly what good fiction does, right? Allow you to explore worlds that you could never be a part of, but in ways that are much more interactive and much more dynamic. The question that Steve raised before about the measurement of the learning that goes on in this game, I mean, if you think about it the way we conventionally measure learning, it just doesn't even make any sense. Like, what would be the outcome that you would measure in playing a game like that? And the question for me is, what will be the measure in an outcome of reading a really good novel? Like, does it change the way you think? Do you see yourself in a different way? Can you sympathize with an environment that you've never participated in before? Thinking about assessment in these kinds of worlds really challenges our assumption about against what? What are the legitimate outcomes that we should think about? I want to talk a little bit about some of the ideas of exploring digital literacy. And I argued before that games are a species of digital literacy. This is a really good white paper. I don't know if you folks are interested in. It's called Confronting the Challenges of Participatory Culture, Media Education in the 21st Century. It's by Henry Jenkins, who directs a Center for Participatory Media Studies at MIT, and it's available for free on the MacArthur Foundation website. And Jenkins et al. Talk about a couple of different ways that we need to think about digital media literacy that's beyond gaming. And in GLS, we're also trying to grapple with these ideas. The first one is the idea of performance. Performance is the ability to adopt alternative identities for the purpose of improvisation and discovery. And one of the things